we will transition to our next presenter for the evening. Up next is Charlotte Gard, NWAC's Program Director. As a coworker, I can attest that Charlotte is essential in all of NWAC's programming and is always finding brilliant and creative ways to improve the work of the Avalanche Center. Charlotte works to expand the reach of the forecast and educational tools to include a larger and more diverse audience. She's also passionate about cultivating programs that draw together the collective experience of the Backcountry community. Today, Charlotte is sharing about the Women's Mentorship Program, a collaborative program between NWAC and She Jumps, aimed at aspiring female identifying avalanche professionals. This program is designed to actively support increased gender diversity in professional avalanche education and snow science by providing a clear path and building peer connection. Before I was hired at NWAC, I was involved in this wonderful program, and so I'm really thrilled to introduce Charlotte to speak on the Women's Mentorship Program. Take it away, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Renee. We started the Women's Mentorship Program at NWAC in order to address the gender disparity that we were seeing in the snow and avalanche industry. The program aims to bring aspiring female avalanche professionals into the field. And because many of these professions are dependent on experience, which is often driven by mentorship, the goal is to provide concrete steps towards building connections and gaining experience, with the end result being having more women working in the snow and avalanche fields. The program really got started due to a scholarship program that She Jumps was running. She Jumps is an organization that works nationally to get women into the outdoors. And they'd started the Snowpack Scholarship in 2018 in order to reduce barriers for women getting into the backcountry in general. So they were running scholarships, either full scholarships or half scholarships for women and women of color looking to take area level 1s. And we had been a part of the program from the beginning, really as a way to lend some expertise and to help spread the word. But it was in the second year of the program in 2019 that they reached out to us because they were really struggling to find women to teach the programs. Even though they had reached out across all of the Pacific Northwest, they were just unable to find people that could teach the programs here. So we as an organization at NWAC don't generally teach area level 1s, and that's because we think that those programs are covered so well in the industry. There's already many wonderful guide services across the Pacific Northwest that are teaching avalanche area level 1s, and our goal is to focus on filling unmet needs. But when we were talking to so many of these women at the She Jumps program and looking to staff these scholarship programs, we recognized that maybe this is an unmet need. And so we started to kind of dive in deeper. And ultimately, as we tried to staff these programs, we recognized we had to reach out nationally. We reached out to every female lead instructor across the entire United States. And ultimately, we were able to bring somebody down from Alaska to teach the program. In addition to staffing the program, it also drove us to look a little bit more closely at gender disparity nationwide and at other avalanche professionals. So what do we mean when we say an avalanche professional? An avalanche professional is someone who works in avalanche mitigation or avoidance. A professional, that might be a professional ski patrol, avalanche forecasters, the folks at the Department of Transportation who make sure that avalanches don't cross roads and highways, avalanche educators, and mountain guides. What these things have in common is that they are all complex and high-risk trades with very little formal steps to getting into them. If you were to ask all 8 of the field staff at the Northwest Avalanche Center about how they got into avalanche forecasting, you would hear 8 different stories. What they have in common is that they have hundreds of days in the field and that they have really solid mentors. So one thing that we know about all professionals is that they got started recreationally. Maybe you grew up skiing inbounds or grew up climbing and you met guides, or you started to tour with people that were interested in working in the industry. But when we looked at the numbers, we recognized that we were actually doing a pretty good job of getting women into recreational snow sports. The Ski Industry Association did a study of about 11.6 million skiers from 2009 to 2017 and found that 42% of them are female. And what's interesting is that in those same number of years, the number of women participating in snow sports went up 7%, and men participating went down 13%. So that we know that women are passionate about snow sports and getting into it. However, when we start to look up the ladder at women working or being paid to work in the industry, those numbers drop off dramatically. Looking at Ski Patrol, about 10% nationwide are women. For the American Mountain Guides Association, the body that certifies guides in the United States, 9% of certified ski guides are female, and 7% of IFMGA guides, those are guides that have gone through all of the disciplines of mountain guiding, are female. Avalanche forecasters, 14%, and avalanche educators, both instructors and lead instructors, at 15 and 11%, which clues you in at that 11% on why it was so hard to find female instructors, even nationwide, to staff the Ski Jumps program. And I think when talking about what the disparity looks like in the industry, we can't avoid what our own staff looks like. And this has come up across some of the other presentations we've done. You don't have to be particularly perceptive to notice that our field staff is not particularly diverse. And I want to emphasize that this is a group of excellent men who are all cognizant of disparity and very much in support of diversifying the workforce. The problem isn't that we have male forecasters. It's that if you're a woman interested in avalanche forecasting, you may not look at this group and see yourself in it or see ways that you can get involved. Just a side note that we are in the process of hiring an avalanche forecaster right now, so stay tuned for that update coming to you very soon. So why do we focus on mentorship as opposed to some other realm of women working in the outdoor space? And that's because, like I said, everyone working in the industry begins recreationally, but that's also where many of these barriers begin. There is a really great talk from Eva Latoso from 2018's NSAW, I think we'll drop it in the chat, where she discusses why mentorship is so key, particularly in the snow and avalanche industry. And that's because avalanche professionals are dealing with intense uncertainty, and you can't learn it all from the book. Avalanche professionals rely on hundreds of days in the field, and much of that time is with mentors. So they draw on the collective experience in order to apply it to their own work. Mentorship really accelerates your level of competency, and it's of a subject that you can't gain all on your own. And mentorship barriers for women are particularly acute because mentorship is really organic, and we create those relationships and bonds over time, and it's much easier to do when somebody looks like you. We've heard from many women that it can be challenging to build these relationships because they are quite personal. I think this is summed up really well in an article that Heather Hansman wrote for Powder Magazine, where she interviewed Sheldon Kerr, who just became the 12th IFMGA female guide in the United States. She said that the lack of female mentorship manifests itself in subtle and deeply ingrained ways. It's such a physically intimate sport that men don't ask women to go on expeditions because there's a level of it being inappropriate. Now, that is not to say that women can't be mentored by men or aren't mentored by men, or that women don't go on expeditions, only that it creates this extra barrier. And when there's already barriers to mentorship, when it's already challenging to foster and create those relationships, this can be an added barrier that keeps many women out of the sport. Which cued the women's mentorship program that we started in 2019 in conjunction with the Ski Jumps Snowpack Scholarship. Originally, 22 women applied for the program, and we selected 5 to go through it. However, due to COVID, we were only able to run 1 area program, and therefore only 2 women will be able to complete the program this year. The formal elements of the program are that you shadow an area level 1, and there's a pre-day before that where you work with the educators of the program, and you go through kind of some of the teaching elements and start to foster those connections. And then you, during the program, are able to teach discrete segments around like pre-trip checklists, or what to pack, or what to bring out with you in the field. Following the program, we pair mentees up with professionals in the field and specifically around areas that they might want to go into. If a mentee was interested in avalanche forecasting, we'd pair them with an avalanche forecaster at NWAC, or if they were interested in mountain guiding, we'd tap our network to help get them in contact with a mountain guide to get out for a day in the field. We also did a number of virtual sessions in order to increase tools around digital mapping and observations. But what I thought was particularly powerful about the program was sort of the informal interactions. All of the mentees and educators stayed for the course during the duration of the course in the same place, and there was a lot of interaction, just casual conversations over breakfast and dinner about what they'd seen in the industry, and there was this wide array of experience between the different people involved. The lead instructor, Jenna Bossevert, has decades of experience working in the snow and avalanche industry and used to own a guide service. And our secondary instructor, Bridget Anderson, who was the education coordinator at the time and also a big driver of this program, has been in the industry since 2016. Whereas the mentees have significantly less experience in the field, but had already been doing a little bit of summertime guiding or work there, but had seen all these barriers to getting into the snow and avalanche world because they were lacking in connections. So they were able to chat and figure out ways that they could overcome some of these barriers, and then fully unprompted through the program, the mentees and Jenna got out for a day in the field after the program ended, which was a particular highlight because I think it really emphasized how quickly some of these connections can form and then how lasting they can be. So what's next for this upcoming season? We will run the mentorship program again. This year it will include 9 participants, including the 3 that weren't able to participate last season due to COVID. We continue to focus on the quality over quantity of this program. We think in order to have true impact, we need to ensure that these women are actually making connections and actually gaining some of the experience that they need to continue down that pathway. For that reason, we are also focusing on including past participants so that there are some pathways for women to stay involved and continue in fostering those connections. The Snowpack Scholarship continues to be a super integral part of this program. This year, similarly to the last few years, 30 women will participate in the program this year, and 50% of those spots are earmarked for women of color. The Snowpack Scholarship is open now, but just about to close on the 31st. So if you or a woman, female identifying person in your circle is interested in taking an Area Level 1 and is looking at some financial barriers, then I encourage them to apply. That program will also be dropped into the chat. Additionally, the women's mentorships application will open in early November, and we will make sure to share news of that around with you. This program is very much in its infancy. It's absolutely not all of the answers to all of the barriers of entry for mentorship generally, or specifically around women. And we recognize there are things that it's not currently addressing and maybe isn't able to address, but we welcome feedback around the program. And if you'd like to learn more, there's a lot of resources out there online and through our website, but I also welcome you to reach out to me if you have any questions or want to get involved. Thank you.
Charlotte, thanks so much for the presentation. You do such a beautiful job of really explaining all of the awesome connections of this program and the pathways. I just think it's really refreshing to see programs like this happening. And I can speak from my experience that it was a wonderful experience. And if you're interested, you should keep an eye out for those applications. We have a question from Kim in the audience, and she is wondering if there are thoughts about progressing to a women's level 2. Finding women's only level 2 is almost impossible in the industry, she says.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's more one that lies with some of the She Gems programming. I think that they're really focusing on that kind of the widest part of the funnel, trying to get as many women involved in as possible. And running a level 2 is certainly something that we've talked about and considered, and I think is a really good point. It can be really challenging, and it can be a barrier. So it is a good point, and we are actively looking into it. Thanks, Kim.
Wonderful. Up next, we have a question from Ava. Since the past participants continue to keep included in the events, will you be able to follow up on how mentorship programs have made a difference to these participants?
Yeah, totally. We have been in contact with both of the participants, Amber and Haley, that took part last year. Amber is working in this year in Utah and Colorado and continues to be involved and in contact with our forecasters. Haley's also unfortunately working out of the state, but we are hoping to involve them at least in the virtual elements of the program this year so that they can continue to work. And though Renee wasn't able to fully complete the program this year, I hope we can speak to her continuing to be involved in the snow and avalanche industry as she's now working with us at NWAC.
Thanks, Charlotte. And thanks for those putting questions in the Q&A. Up next, Matt Henry says, my preferred ski touring partner is female, and it's great to see more women in the backcountry. Does it actually make sense to hold gender-specific AVI classes as most groups will be mixed gender?
Yeah, I think that it's a good question. And we actually did talk about whether or not the airy portion, so the snowpack portion, would be only women. And I think one thing that we just kept hearing over and over from participants is that the feeling of an area level 1 is really different when it's all female versus when they're mixed groups. And while we recognize that there are going to be different dynamics among different groups, we feel that it's really important to foster that type of learning environment. And there are many mixed gender area level 1s that you can take out there. So if that's your preference and that's your learning style, then absolutely you can take one of those.
Charlotte, I think that's such a wonderful point to bring up, and one that I've had personal experience with. My level 2 being completely male, it is just a really different experience. And in order to ask the questions and have the full breadth of knowledge, I feel like it's so beneficial to see people that you look like you in those positions. So really appreciate the program, the time tonight, and your willingness to speak on these topics. So we have one time for one more question. Heidi is wondering about qualifications for the mentorship program, i.e. Area 2, experience, etc.
Yeah, it's a good question and something that we were super intentional about. We wanted to ensure that while there was interest in going into professional avalanche work, that we weren't creating barriers in a program that was intended to reduce them. So the only requirement of the Women's Mentorship Program is that you've taken a level 1 and have a certificate of that, and that you have expressed interest in going into professional snow and avalanche work, but you don't need to have had any experience actually working in those fields. And it's one of the things that we're trying to help with is get people experience there. Thanks, Heidi.
Absolutely. And I think that is all the time we have for questions this evening, but definitely Charlotte is available, as well as I, to follow up with questions related to this program, and keep an eye out for those applications because they will be available. And I highly encourage, if you have any inkling of interest in this program, it will absolutely change your perspective. So thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, Renee.